Boom. Hello, world. Welcome to the Second Opinion Sports Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Dhokal.
I'm Dr. Glass.
What's up, Dustin? How you doing today? Happy Easter, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Easter, happy Monday, happy all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
How was
good.
your weekend? Did you do anything? I know you got family up north, but you
Yeah,
got
not too much Easter related. My wife's family's up North LA. We didn't see them. We kind of spent Easter together. Busy weekend. Moved offices this week, and so I remember talking to you last week saying next time we talk, the move will be over. So I look forward to our conversation. And so that was the main accomplishment I'd say over the last week. But had a good weekend, man. It was successful. Got everything moved over. It wasn't without any sort of stress, which comes along with it naturally. But checked it off the box and got it done. So now
how's your
onward
body
to
hold
things.
up? How's your body hold up?
You know what? Not bad. From the move, not bad. I went and worked out with my wife, and I decided to try to do her leg workout, and my ACL did not hold up. My knee started to ache, and I'm like sore today. We did that like 2 days ago. So,
What was one of the tougher movements you did with her?
actually, I wanted to talk about that. That's funny. We just talked about like some topics that we wanted to discuss, but since you asked, so since my ACL surgery, a movement that I haven't performed up until the other day was a full squat with a dumbbell, right? And it would seem like by this point in time, after 5 years, I would have done that. But I wouldn't say that I always did that movement anyways, all the time. I did a lot of lunges with dumbbells. I did a lot of like machine leg extensions, leg curls, leg presses. Um, but I always felt like after my accident, doing that kind of hurt my back a little bit. So that's not how I work my legs out. And I wouldn't say I have like tree trunk legs anyways. So um, yeah, so it was interesting because I realized like after the first warm up set, it felt like a difficult set, and I was like, oh shit, this is this feels different. Um, so that's the one that got me. I think that was unusually difficult because I hadn't performed it, and so different parts of my body were responding, like my hamstring, my glutes, just like locking up on me. But because it was weak, right? So doing the curls, doing the extensions on the machine, doing leg presses, not the same as performing that full movement.
Right.
And I
That's
kind of stopped doing it because of my back, and now I think I just need to.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because we talked about. I had a couple early on in the NFL season. We had a couple ACL injuries in the season, and then I had a couple patients coming through at the same time with ACL injuries. I think I had two or three in a month span that I was helping rehab
Mm-hmm.
and work with, and I saw one of the girls today. We're on a monthly basis now, coming in for spinal tune-up. She's she's at the later phase of her rehab right now. She's a basketball player, 16-year-old basketball player. This is a pivotal year, junior year, trying to get recruited, trying to go to college. So always
Nice.
has colleges looking at her. He comes from he has a good background and base already. But anyways, had this ACL injury, kind of devastating for your junior year. But
Heck
reassured
yeah.
her, hey, don't worry. The coaches have been great during the recruitment season. Say, hey, we don't care about any of the auxiliary play. Just get healthy. We know you can play. So that's a huge testament to a lot of these, higher up, almost all coaches at all levels have that approach when it comes to an injury. If they know the player, what they're capable of, at this point, they want to see how do they rebound, right?
Right.
How do they come back from something like that? That tells them a lot about what kind of player they're going to be when setbacks happen when they're in college, right? So
100%.
we kind of have those conversations. But anyway, she's at the different phases, and I wish I knew exactly how many months in she was, but she's at the phase where she just got cleared to. The only thing she's restricted now is no contact in basketball and no cutting yet. But she got cleared, I think, last week or the week before to start working with her strength and conditioning coach for the first time. So she just started doing all that. One of the questions was to me today. She brought in her brace. She's never worn her brace yet, and she's getting conflicting, questions or statements from coaches and players and everybody that thinks they know something about the brace. Should she wear the brace? Should she not wear the brace? Orthopedist told her she should be wearing it for another year and a half, even after she's done, to
Right.
protect that area. And so, and it's one of those nice, braces that are lightweight but,
Mm-hmm. They're
you know,
expensive.
they're very expensive, molded to her, fitted to her. So it was like I told her with, and it'll be interesting, what your take is, and I think I know, but when it comes to bracing for what I told her, I said during PT, during your rehab phase, don't be wearing the brace during your PT. When you're doing PT with your physical therapist that's been with you day one since surgery, stay out of the brace and that's the time to rehab. When you
Right.
start on court, because they've been doing on court drills, without cutting or contact, I said, that's the time to play basketball. Now your mindset should be basketball, not rehab.
Correct.
So put the brace on so we don't have to think that we take that out of the equation. So then her next question was, okay, well, what about doing my strength and conditioning, which is very linear movement right now,
Mhm.
squats, cleans, deadlift, step ups, lunges, stuff like that. And so my thing was, I said, listen, you have a strength and conditioning coach that's very knowledgeable, knows what they're doing. Um, and so I would be okay if you stayed out of the brace for that, kind of phased in from PT to, into your strength conditioning, having these two coaches that really know what they're doing. They know
Watching.
what to do. And I said, with that kind of strength conditioning, you're not doing high intensity interval training where it's a bunch of ballistic movements. I said, I'm okay if you don't wear the brace during strength and conditioning. And then as I'm talking to her, I had this thought process. I'm like, wait a minute. Now you're just getting into strength and conditioning. Your muscles might start to fatigue. You might start to lose form and function, even with a coach there. I said, so for this first couple of weeks, what I'd like you to actually do is wear the brace during strength and conditioning for your squats, because this is the first time you're loading on a squat.
Right.
And I said, all you would need is for you to go past the point where you thought you were comfortable because you got tired, because you fatigued your knee, one of the stabilized muscles fatigues faster than you thought. The knee goes in, and then you have another issue
Right.
that happened due to fatigue, not due to form and function at that point. I said, so you know what? Until you are comfortable with, until your brain and your body is comfortable with all the strength and conditioning movements you're going to be doing for the next couple of months, because every single session right now is a brand new session. It's a brand new introducing new movements. Even though
Mm-hmm.
you've done squats, all these movements you've done before in the past, but they're
Mm-hmm.
archived. So right now it's a clean slate. You're starting fresh. So I said we need to build an endurance. Until the endurance is there, I said I'd probably wear that brace right now until you're secure with every movement. Then bail out of the brace and only use the brace for your play time. Where it's not as controlled. So it was kind of an interesting in one session how I went from,
Yeah.
yeah, I to stay off your base. You know what? No, and so I don't know. What do you think about that? My question is, with that strength and conditioning phase, and I can go either way, and that's why I told her I can go either way. I can make an argument for either way with that coach, but my fear is the 16-year-old girl that is still trying to figure out her body anyways,
Right.
still trying to figure out a new knees body with an ACL reconstruction, so that's why I said, you know what, put the training wheels on and put that on during strength and conditioning as well. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think I made the right call, or
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, actually. I get why you were saying to not have the brace on, right? Especially when you're at PT, you have an expert watching you, watching your movements, you're doing things specifically for a reason. That's the time to not have that crutch and see how you perform for real, and then have somebody give you feedback. So I think that's exactly what I would do. Um, and I think my first instinct would be like yours, to say, when you're training, also leave it off, because you want it to respond the way it responds. And if you have a professional or an expert watching you, then you're not advancing and progressing at an accelerated pace. You're doing it pragmatically. And, you would catch the weakness, you'd catch the knee going in, for instance, if you were doing a squat, or if, in my case, like my hamstring started to lock up, I had a hamstring graft. And so what was funny is, as I was doing, a set of 10, I had the bench underneath the Smith machine for my wife in case she fatigued. I was kind of, helping her out, going through her training workout. And each rep, I felt a different part give, give. Each part told me, nope, nope, nope. And here I am, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'm thinking it out as I'm doing it. also I was kind of like, what the heck? This is like lighter than my warm up used to be, and so I'm trying to figure it out as I'm doing it. And then that last set, it just gave, and like I think if I was a little more inexperienced, I might have just lost it and let my knee give. But I kind of did a controlled sit and then had to like, you know, just readjust it. And so um I think you don't know how your body's going to respond until you do that, right? So like I was wrong in that situation just because I'd done years of extensions and curls and lunges. Like, yo, I just never did I never did that particular movement, right? And so it I could see somebody who's coming off an injury, especially when it's acute. Like mine's not acute anymore. It's just weak. And I think that brace being on for those first couple weeks until that's a good thing. Then you can focus on the movement versus the injury, which is hard enough anyways.
Right. No,
I mean, you've had
interesting.
it before, right?
What's that?
You've had a couple ACLs before, so you know.
Yeah, so personally, I've had two I had a lateral release, and then I had some cleanup stuff on mine, and I have a
Gotcha.
torn meniscus currently. But I had another patient today, so I appreciate your insight with having your ACL. I had another patient today that is 3 weeks off of ACL surgery,
Okay.
and she came in the first time I've seen her since surgery. I saw her a couple times while she was getting ready. I prehabbed her,
Hmm.
but this is the first time I had seen her post surgery. She just got off crutches a couple days ago. She started feeling in her back, so I'm pretty much just concentrating on her back, ankle alignment, knee alignment, alignment type issues. And
Yeah.
I have a PT that's working with her that I'm really happy with. That really dynamically will get her back in. She's in her 50s, early
Mm.
50s, but healthy, healthy, active 50. And so, but her getting off crutches, her biggest complaints right now, and I want to know if you can recall any of this post surgery, but deep calf pain, not, and we're not, and it's not vein or I mean, or it's not clotting
Oh,
type.
right.
Yeah, it's more when she's using it. It's more, it feels like a deep bruise. It comes in kind of like a twingy feel. She's got that, and she's got some nerve issues on the anterior tibialis down that area,
Yeah.
and so she's just asking, will that ever go away? What is, I explained to her how, anytime you cut into something, listen, she had more of a repair than a reconstruction, which was good. But they cleaned up her ACL and her meniscus. But I said, anytime you're cut up and you have devices in there and they're, moving stuff around, nerves can get irritated, tissues can get irritated, and there's a healing process. Just like if you had a sunburn, just like if you had a cut, there's a healing process. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean. Anyway, so I explained to her, for my surgeries, my knee's never been perfect. It's never felt the same, but it's a heck of a lot better than pre-surgery. So I wanted her
Yeah.
to understand that, because a lot of people that aren't in the world of rehab or surgery, they think of it very mechanical, like taking your car in, right?
Sure.
Go in, you get it fixed, and it should be brand new. Well, that's not how surgery works, So,
It's a great point.
but is it a lot better? Yeah, and you're so happy you got it done, even though it's not great, right? So I wanted to really remind her of that. That hey, listen, as we go through this, you got to remember your good days and your new normal. You just got to change the your definition of what a good knee should feel like, and it's going to
Sure.
feel great compared to how it was prior to surgery. You couldn't even walk, you were limping, it was swollen, you couldn't even extend your knee. Now you got full knee extension. Does it hurt? Yeah, but you can do it. It's functional. So I don't know. So
Great
what
point.
do you recall? Do you recall from your knee surgery some of those weird
Yeah.
things afterwards that
I remember being shocked at the atrophy, right? So I waited about 6 months before I had my ACL surgery from the time I tore it because I was working through like my busy season, which was the NFL season. And so I had surgery at the end of March, beginning of April. I tore it like in October. So in that time, I had a ton of atrophy. Pain wise, post surgery, when you mentioned it, the first thing I thought of was the like anterior tibialis numbness below the knee, lateral. So below my knee, outer part of my shin, that area was numb and painful. Sometimes felt like a toothache in that area, right? And man, the numbness and the weirdness in that area persisted for a couple years, even longer. And I remember kind of mobilizing it myself. It's on a point of my body. Used to be a massage therapist. Like I'm messing with that. I'm cupping it. I'm manipulating the tissue, the fascia, trying to increase blood flow. I'm using PEMF. I'm using cold laser. Sometimes whatever it was, waking that up made it worse. So then the next day when I went to work and I had to be working around a table, sitting down in a doctor's chair, getting back up, right? Like it's intensive on your knees and back, I would say, because you're doing a lot of up and down, up and down. Yeah, that hurt. So there were some times that I just left it alone and was like, I'm not going to mess with it, because when I do, even though I think it's good for it, see, that's where being like a doctor is a negative, I think, because if I went to you, you'd be like, you need to come see me 2, 3 times a week, and I'm going to work on this area and just deal with the after effects because it's the process. Right. Me, I'm like, well, realistically, I do that. I know it's good for me, but it makes my day exponentially harder, right? So now in retrospect, I wish I just would have worked through that. I kind of took a little bit of an easy route because I needed to get through my day. It was like, when I say hurt, it wasn't like a 3 out of 10. It was like I'm working on a patient and I'm like, holy shit, I can't like sit down. Now I'm thinking about myself instead of the patient. And that's not, that's not the vibe. So yeah. The anterior tib pain was big. I don't remember too much calf pain. I remember a lot of atrophy. And so, yeah, I mean, I would do it again a little bit differently the second time around. And having that experience, I try to, share that with patients, right? Like, keep working on that.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been fun helping out in any aspect, in any way you can, knowing your role, right? So, and I've done the full rehab with the soft tissue for knee, and I'm at this phase with these couple. I'm staying in my lane and doing the chiropractic, which is kind of cool,
Right.
Kind of like when I'm working with the teams, we all have our own role, and now I
Sure.
can focus mainly on the chiropractic. But it's nice, and there's a respect thing where they're both asking me to kind of oversee, make sure it's going away. I feel like it should. So I think that's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to have like a little bit of a bird's eye view on how things are going, and you can, give your opinion and maybe learn something along the way as well, right? And help those patients.
For sure, for sure.
I think knowing what to expect is a big part of it, and that's helpful, right? Like, hey, this is normal, or this is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't expect to be doing XYZ right away, but expect to be doing it maybe a year from now. That at least frames it for you.
Yeah, correct.
Um, Man, that's interesting. So, well, thanks for asking about that. Now it's on tape that I had to tap out of a workout with my wife. That's awesome.
I set you up. Knew where this was
Well,
going.
I've given it some thought, and in the new office, my partner Courtney has a lot of rehab equipment, and so I noticed the day after we moved in, there's a full rack and bar. There's a Pilates machine in there, a reformer, and so I'm about to get in great shape between now and football season. It kind of pissed me off, to be quite honest, that my body gave out a little bit, and I'm like, man, that's why there's no jumper in my jump shot anymore. Like, so I have some goals to build on as far as that goes, and yeah, so to be continued on that. But I wanted to ask you if you saw, to flip the page a little bit, if you saw any of the NCAA basketball championship.
Oh, we did our podcast last Monday, and the point was we wanted to be done so we can go watch that.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to get creative with our cable down here recently, and I didn't get it. I didn't get the coverage of the game, so I was
Got
pretty
you.
so I had to watch it via the, updates online, which
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
kind of bummed about because I was really looking forward to seeing it. Obviously, it didn't turn out the way they wanted to. It was a little more lopsided than I hoped. But what about in the first couple? Was it close? How did it look? I mean,
Yeah, I
uh,
think it was I felt like they were in the game, there was a lot of back and forth. I'd say UConn looked like the big brother to the little brother a little bit. They were both good. There was a little more explosiveness. There was, if I was to simplify it to, somebody who doesn't watch basketball all the time, I would say that it seemed as though SDSU needed their A plus game or their A game to win this. And, I think they probably brought like a B plus A minus game. It's just UConn brought their A game too, right? And when both teams bring their A game, I think most people would say UConn is favored in that matchup. And so, um, they won the championship. Hats off to UConn. They're not new to winning the championship. They've had, I think this is their fifth in recent, like 15 years or 20 years or something. And for San Diego State, man, it was a great run. Nobody expected them to make it to the Elite Eight. Forget even the Final Four. Forget the championship. And hoops is funny. Sometimes you can get hot, and sometimes the other team can be cold. And so, it in the tournament. What's great is it's a one game. That's it. It's not a series, and anything can happen. And like I said, hats off to UConn. Of course, I was rooting for San Diego State. But what a great tournament.
yeah, no, that's it. And that squad goes down in history for San Diego, right? How cool is
Yeah,
that? For the rest
dude.
of their life, that'll be brought up every year. For anytime San Diego's in the talk, that team will get brought up. So they've left their mark, and that's great.
Yeah, yeah, they'll be talked about for a long time, and also probably affected the program in a positive way, where they're on more people's map,
Yep,
and that should help recruiting. It should help the program, everything, the whole school. So
sure.
uh,
Win-win.
happy about that. I am wearing my Masters green today. I didn't know if
Yeah,
you noticed, but
yeah.
I did watch some golf this weekend too. Did you catch any of the 4 days of action?
I did not. We were. Yeah, I was not in front of the TV at all this weekend, so didn't even see any highlights. So fill me in.
Yeah, so I didn't watch every single hour of golf over the 4 days, with the office move and stuff. I do like to try to carve out time to watch a little bit of it every day. I like the tournament. I like the sport of golf. I wouldn't say I'm a rabid fan and I know everything about everybody, but a PT friend of mine has worked with Brooks Koepka, so I was kind of pulling for him this weekend. He had the lead after the first 3 days. There was some weather that came into play where it rained, and they had to suspend play. Then a few groups had to pick up play early the next morning, finish their round before they started the next day's round. So essentially, if you're not a golf fan, you're playing your 18 holes of the round of Saturday, but you're finishing 6 or 8 or 10 holes of your Friday round that got postponed. It's like extra innings in baseball, right? Or a doubleheader essentially. So, yeah, Brooks was ahead after 3 days, and John Rahm, another golfer who was close. They were playing in the same group, and to start the match off on the last day on Sunday, Brooks had like a bogey and Rahm got a birdie. So right off the get, it was a two-stroke flip, and I think Brooks was up by 4 strokes. And that first hole, he cut that down to 2 strokes, and um, yeah, John just looked hot that day. That's what's weird about golf. So he had a better day. It was fun to watch. I watched a lot of the back half of the I guess the 9 holes on Sunday. I watched at a buddy's house. He was having a Masters party. The Masters puts out this box that you can order that has cups and napkins and the actual Masters food that they serve in Augusta. So he ordered this box that came with pimento cheese sandwiches and pulled pork sliders and chips and all this stuff. So he's a big golf fan. He was nice enough to invite us over, so we watched, 9 of the 18 holes. and watched John beat Brooks for the championship. So I did watch a little bit of it. It was fun to watch. Um, Good to hang out. It was good to hang out with a buddy.
That's when you mentioned the food. I got an opportunity. I got selected to work the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach a couple of years
Wow.
ago. Yeah,
Wow.
which was a huge experience. So I was part of the medical team, and it's like when you go there and you work, it's like a village, just like the Olympic Village kind of,
Right.
but very scaled down. And but we had a whole medical. I think we had the chiropractic trailer. I think had 5 chiropractic rooms in there. So the
Wow.
trailer actually had individual rooms, which was really cool. Labeled off. There was an exam room, 4 or 5 actual treatment rooms. So that was pretty cool. Never
Amazing.
seen anything like that. And then they had a whole hyper ice or Normatec trailer. So they
Gotcha.
had just the chairs with all the Normatec. Then we had a hyperbaric chamber there. So 1 or 2 chambers running for the guys. And then but my point was the cafeteria or the cafe or the whatever you want to call it, their dining hall was unbelievable. The
Really
food was top notch. It was like at a 5-star restaurant. Very cool layout.
nice.
I've worked AVP volleyball tournaments,
Volleyball.
which they had similar setups where the food was unbelievable, the tents were unbelievable. But this was like a whole nother level. And it was cool. But the funny thing is, so you see all these golfers and you see what they do, and you're around all the great names, right? And
Sure.
you get to go. And what the one thing we did was we got to go watch them warm up at and just to hear the chatter, to hear the talk. But what was cool, one of the most memorable parts of it was besides the food. Food was really good, but
Sure.
is I expected more of the golfers to come through on a regular. We mostly saw caddies, and all the guys that had done that before had told me like, you're
There's
going to see mostly the caddies. Most of the golfers have their own team already. You're
sure.
going to see them; they come in, but it's not like they're coming in on the regular. They're coming on one-offs as they need something. Whereas
Right.
the caddies are in there loving it. But anyway, talk about stories. These caddies, because they're the flies on the wall, right?
Right.
You get
Right.
to hear and see, and then the caddies get together and they talk, and man, that was pretty cool just to hear the stories and just to live it through them. The caddies were really cool. They're
Awesome.
yeah, so that was a good experience. But so I
Hey,
never that was the only time I ever been to Pebble Beach, and we walked the course. Me and Leanne. It was her birthday weekend too, so we flew out there up to Santa Cruz and then made a trip out of there and at our last day walked the greens and it was really cool. It was beautiful just being
man,
on a coast like that and just to see what goes into it. It's unbelievable. So
man, it's on my bucket list to play. I haven't yet. I hear you got to stay at the lodge to get a tee time, and the lodge is, a 4-digit $1,000 plus a night. The round of golf is expensive too. But I know some people who played, and I know some people who played, and the weather has been terrible the day that they played and had the tee time. And so that's unfortunate too. If you get a real windy, rainy, you know,
well,
Monterey day.
yeah, well, living on the coast, any given day, like today, the coastal fog coming in was so heavy and
Yeah.
it was a huge layer, but then it burned off by 10, 11 o'clock. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But, up there, the northern coast like that, you get more wind, it's unpredictable, a lot of times. So it'd be a bummer not being able to predict it and then show up. But that's part
Yeah.
of being out there. You're like, okay, let's roll with it and let's see what we can do, just like the big boys.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned that on the Masters podcast, on the Masters broadcast, I should say, not podcast, that some guys just don't like the weather. It's like it's rainy, it's windy, the ball's harder to hit. The ball feels different when it's 80 degrees and sunny than if it's, 45 degrees and cold. I've hit some golf balls early in the morning out here in San Diego, out east, and there's ice on the balls. You know, they like lay them out in a pyramid, and you're hitting that thing, bro, and it's like taking a baseball off the handle. You know, like, geez, bro, I don't think I'm swinging hard for like 6 holes. You know, waiting for things to warm up. So that's part of it. You know, the elements. I wanted to bring up one golfer. I don't know if you heard of him. His name's Eldrick Woods. He has played some golf. He is well known, I think, around most parts. But yeah, Tiger had to withdraw, unfortunately, out of the Masters. He made the cut, which was nice, meaning he finished in the top half
I
of the
think he set a
golfers.
record for that, right? For making that cut. I think I read that. I think most all time, or
Tied, I think, tied like 23 or 26. I
I
don't know
think
the exact number. It was close at the end of Friday. He made it by a stroke. He bogeyed his last 2 holes, which is, you know, over par for those who aren't golf fans, and it looked like he wasn't going to make the cut. And then somebody else made a bogey essentially, and it dropped the cut line down, so it included him.
yeah.
Those two guys are buddies as well, so people were like, "Oh, JT did Tiger a solid, and you know, got an extra stroke, and so he made the cut." Either way, my point is, he had to withdraw out of a tournament, which Tiger's done that in the past. You know, it's well documented from his injuries, some of which are super severe. I read a thing today how somebody spoke on how he withdrew, and I forget the tournament, but he withdrew out of a tournament because one of the screws in his foot had pierced his skin. That was in 2022. And so I was like, God, that's aggressive. Like, is that a bad surgery? Is that just, you know, whatever it was? So this time he withdrew because of plantar fasciitis, is what I read, and I think you had spoke on that too. What did you see or read?
Yeah, I read that same thing, and we were just talking about the cold elements, right? So that played into it. From what I read, it was cold, and
Sure.
that definitely plays a part in it. When you're walking that much, and you're the conditions aren't favorable as it is, and you have an issue already. His mechanics, have been altered over the years. I mean, he was, if not the most, one of the most in shape golfers on the tour for a long time.
Right.
And he was known for his routine. From his mobility work, and his strength work, and it built his endurance. That's why he was so good for so long. But then injuries start plaguing you, starts breaking down mechanics, right? And then your body has to start, compensating along the way. Well, he had the car accident, which really, just to be able to do what he's done coming back from the car accident. And I
Amazing.
don't, yeah, and I can't remember all the different injuries. I know his leg was pretty. I think that was took the worst of it, and there's 26 little bones in your feet, and we've talked about this in the past, and you got 3 parts of the ankle, and if that's not 100%, and your body has to work harder walking and doing things, and it's going to translate into your knee and into your hip, which he's had both, and then he's had a history of low back issues, so that's the force is directly going to go through that, and it makes it very difficult to play at your best game. And when you're used to a certain level of play and you can't fully give everything you've got, then I can understand why he has to pull out. And plantar fasciitis is one of those most. I always tell people I don't wish that. Actually, I do wish it upon my worst enemy. Like that's one of those.
Right.
Like
Go through
if I
that.
could wish something upon somebody that I didn't like or whatever,
Yeah.
and I didn't want them to really hurt, but I want them to really hurt.
Yeah.
I'd give them plantar fasciitis. It's a
Because it never goes away.
it takes forever, and it does. And like I was mentioning, you got it's that major ligament on the bottom of your foot. It kind of acts as like the spring during gait, walking gait, and you need that. That fascia, is so important for the propulsion of your gait and the movement for the arch to, so it doesn't break down and
Right. Collapse.
but collapse. Thank you. So when it gets irritated, the most force is usually towards that heel area, not on the back of the heel, but right kind of where the arch meets the heel, and that type of pain and it's very painful and very restrictive. So,
Yeah.
have you had much experience treating them? I mean, as a soft tissue practitioner, I've had a number of cases. I work with a lot of dancers. It is somewhat common. And usually people come in, they think they have plantar fasciitis, and usually I'm able to rule it out as something else
Hmm.
that mimics plantar fasciitis, but
Such
typically
as.
well, posterior tibialis tendonitis. That's the most common that I see because the way the posterior tib tendon comes down, reaches underneath that medial malleolus and then
Hmm.
down there, pretty close to where that plantar fascia is, and usually that causes that plantar flexion and inversion type motion. And so when you go to stride, it strains that area a little. So it's pretty common, but the first thing people say is that they got plantar fasciitis because they Google heel pain or foot pain,
Right.
and it goes up. But then you got to go through the history of, when does it hurt? How does it hurt? How long does it take to go away? And then once you start talking about it, you realize it's not really plantar fasciitis. What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing because I feel like when we first started practice, people used to come in and say, "Hey, what is this?" And now people come in and they say, "Hey, this is what I have."
Yeah.
And then you have to like confirm that, or then convince them that that's not what it is. It's actually this, and this is why it is this. So I feel like sometimes there's a little bit of unwinding that you have to do, because people use Dr. Google, or you know, of course you're going to search out your symptoms. That's a smart thing to do. So you want to have a little bit of background knowledge, and I do appreciate that people come in with a foundational sense of what's going on, and then you can build on that. But yeah, that's why I was laughing at. I feel
Yeah.
like early on people would say, "What is this?" Like, I have this, and now people, I feel like, come in and say, "Hey, I have plantar fasciitis. I have carpal tunnel. I have, you know,
Yeah.
greatest shoulder." You're
I
like, "Well,
love that.
let's
I
check
love
it
when people come in and tell me what they have. I'm like, well, why are you even here? Like,
out." They need your hands. They need the rehab. They need the sequence and the duration and all the keys.
yeah, we could have a whole podcast on that, on what people come in and tell us they have, and then we educate them on why they don't have that. But
Yeah.
that'd be a fun one. But getting back to the plantar fasciitis, one thing I learned from actual hockey, we had one of our hockey seminars we had for I'm part of the pro hockey chiropractic society. We
Hmm.
have an annual seminar where we bring in speakers, just like any other, you
Sure.
know. But one of the speakers we had was he was a podiatrist talking about the foot and orthotics, and especially for hockey, which most people think in the skate they don't have any issues, right?
Sure.
But hockey, the foot and the ankle is something that we do treat a lot of, especially soft tissue. Even though you don't need a lot of mobility because it's locked into the skate, you still need to have, you still have to have the integrity of the whole chain there,
Right.
healthy. So, anyways, one of the things I learned in the seminar, which made me think, the traditional treatment for plantar fasciitis is to stretch the foot. Okay, and I used to always, hey, get one of those. Go to CVS, grab one of those socks that has the leash that pulls your foot back,
Yeah.
and wear it at night. Keep your foot flexed, because part of one of the main diagnostic points of plantar fasciitis is the first thing in the morning you have pain on the first couple steps,
Yeah.
and that's because throughout the night the foot has been shortened. The first step you make flattens out the foot, or the arch collapse as natural, and it tugs on that fascia, and so it hurts. So the traditional treatment will, if you're already stretched when you make that first step, it won't hurt.
Hmm.
But it never goes away. It takes forever. And one of the things the podiatrist taught us was, listen, let's look at the mechanics of that. You want an arch in your foot, and you have that ligament, the plantar fasciitis, the plantar fascia ligament that wraps from the heel bone to the toes, and it's supposed to be part of that windlass mechanism, which creates that spring-like effect on that arch.
Hmm.
Well, if you take tension and you stretch it,
Right.
that's you strain that area through a force or something from whatever you're doing that's causing it in the first place, running whatever hiking, whatever that's caused it to be overstretched and strained. And now you're pulling on that heel area where the plantar fascia attaches, and you strained it. Now you're taking it under more stretch. You're making it take longer to heal because you're keeping it under the pressure that's caused it in the first place.
That's a long time too, right? Yeah. Like you're leaving that extended essentially for however long you sleep. That's hours. Take your forearm. If you're, did bicep curls and you extend your arm like this, that feels good. You're getting that stretch as you're extending your, your flexors, and you're extending your bicep, and you're getting a little bit into your shoulder and pec maybe even. But if I did that for an hour or 6 hours,
yep, it's not good. Anything, yeah. Good. So that's what they found. And so what his point was listen, instead of stretching that, don't stretch it anymore. You want to do soft tissue, you want to get blood flow to it, you want to keep it loose. So every time you step, it's not tugging, right?
Yep. Yep.
Instead, what would be more important to do, and what research has actually shown, it wasn't just his opinion, but actually take that and roll it out, recreate that arch as soon as you can. Get that arch to be, return to its
form,
normal form. Yeah, that way the fascia returns back to the normal health and normal length as soon as possible, so it can do that spring again.
Sure.
And so I started changing the way I treated plantar fasciitis, and I had them stop the night splint. I had them stop stretching their foot. I still you still needed to stretch the calf, so you could still stretch that by putting a towel or a rope at the arch and pull the foot back instead of putting it over the toes and pulling it back, right? So that's how we started lengthening it, started having them roll out on a regular basis. We've all done the frozen water bottle, roll out the foot. But instead of just doing that for the health or for the feel good aspect of icing it down, now let's do that to recreate it. Take a lacrosse ball, get the movement in there, keep that arch there, and don't lose that arch. And people were responding a lot quicker. And since then, it's been nice to be able to help people speed up their recovery. And it goes against everything they've Googled or that their podiatrists have told them and stuff. So usually by the time we see them, unless it's a pre-existing patient, but when it's the first time, they've tried all that stretching. They've tried PT with plantar fasciitis. They've had it for months to a year, and nothing's helping. Now they come in and you tell them, hey, stop stretching it. They're like, what? That's all I've ever done. Well, how's that working for you? Well, not very good. Well, let's stop doing that and see how it responds. You have nothing to lose. And sure enough, it usually, if that's the major problem, starts clearing out. What's your experience? I mean, and maybe you've done that, maybe you've not. I don't know. Have you heard of other gems when it comes to plantar fascia?
There's a couple things, but I want to ask you, what's been your success rate with after you switched it up from the splint to soft tissue work, and a little bit of a modification in your approach? What's been your success with that? Better, worse, same?
It's been better. I don't have actual numbers, but off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of the ones that haven't been successful. Like in the past, I'd say 50-50 or 60-40, more on the negative side. I figure out 40% of the cases just because it took forever before they had to have injections or shockwave therapy or whatever. But now 80-90% success rate on the ones I've been seeing, with removing that stretch.
It's the foot's a complex part of your body, right? And you explained 26 bones, tons of ligaments, a lot of moving parts in there, ankle joint as well. My experience, so an NFL wide receiver that I work with frequently has had some foot stuff, bother him. Sometimes it's mimic plantar fasciitis, but not been that. Sometimes it has been that. Sometimes, most recently, just this last week, I worked with an NFL safety who was, primarily his chief complaint was a little bit of hip stiffness, like in the acetabular, like hip joint itself, not like hip. Sometimes people say hip and it's like low back or it's hip flexor. This was lateral hip, right? So we were working on that in that assessment. As I went up the chain, it's like glute, low back, also a little bit locked in his normal. I've worked with him before and kind of know what his normal is. I'm like, man, this feels more than usual, right? And going down the hamstring, going down the lateral calf, same thing. It's like, whoa, there's like a continuous, you know, delineation of tightness into here. And so then getting into the Achilles and calf soleus, he's like, yo, before we finish, can we do some work on my feet too? They've been bothering me. And so through some discussion, it's April. And so NFL camps are starting. People are going to report. The draft is at the end of the month, and dreams are going to come true. People are going to get drafted. People who didn't get drafted, there's a lot of people getting in shape, a lot of people doing post combine work to get ready to hopefully be on somebody's team and make an impact. And so, in this particular case, it's been months since this person's put on cleats. And now he's just started to put on cleats, no lateral movement, just kind of some linear work, just some field work, And a lot of the field work up until this point with a lot of my athletes, because I asked them, it's with running shoes or tennis shoes, or it's indoors on turf. It's not cleats. Cleats are like, especially when you get into later years, you're only strapping those bad boys up when you're doing work, right? And even taping, I asked him like, "Hey, are you taping up when you do your training sessions?" Like, no, but when I'm at practice and we're helmet on, even no shoulder pads, I'm taped up. Like, I'm not messing around, but it's a controlled environment when he's training. And so he's wearing cleats. And um, I don't know if it's true, but I have a theory that the spikes of the cleats, where those pressure points are on your foot, create, it either hardens that area, if it's in between your metatarsal bones, it can sit, but sometimes those spikes, depending on your foot, might hit right below a metatarsal bone, and that gets irritated. And that's what I find. I've asked one of my NFL players if he could have the company that he sponsored from move those spikes a fraction of an inch so that they sit in between his metatarsals and not on his metatarsals, right? Does that make sense to you, Dustin, where those cleats are?
That'd be
Um,
interesting. That'd be interesting to really do a deep dive, and I'm sure they, sure they have their scientists trying to figure out their
yeah.
biomechanists, trying to figure that out. But I wonder, there's got to be a reason they are placed where they are. But it'd be nice to know if you did move them, how does that change the mechanics? Are they there, or is it just arbitrary? Do they just put them on? I don't
Well,
know.
well, you notice soccer's different, football's different, right? Like I looked at those cleats.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, and so it must be sport specific. I'm sure there's some science that's gone into that. I'd love to learn more about the data behind that, but in this particular case, they didn't they didn't go back and move the spikes. If that's not something you can do yourself, right? That's like you're making custom cleats. This person's a sponsored person. So there was another brand that the spikes felt different, and he switched companies, So in that particular case, that's what it was. But to answer your question about treatment, my default and my experience has been to, and maybe it's just the cases that have come my way, there's been a lot of tightness at the bottom of the foot. And so when you go and put the foot through a normal range of motion, maybe take like the big toe and just extend it, you can see this band that's just, wound up or bound up. I call them crunchies sometimes. You go and just kind of work the bottom of the foot, and you're like, God, there's like a lot of adhesions in here, or a lot of just like almost feels like scar tissue, it feels gravelly. And so my default has always been like, let's work that out, get that soft tissue to not be as spastic or tight or inflamed or sensitive, um, and then do other things, whether it's shockwave therapy. I've used the ARP wave before, not with great success, but with moderate success, I would say. Not with everybody. For some people, it made their foot issues worse a little bit. It's aggressive. Something that I use that I thought of when you were talking about is just a foam pad. You know, it's having patients just get on the foam pad. You have so many ligaments and bones in your feet. A lot of times, if we're in a shoe, some of those areas of your feet don't get stimulated the way they would if you walked barefoot, for instance, right? And so getting on a foam pad barefoot or with socks on, definitely without shoes, I think wakes up parts of your feet, especially if they're older, people our parents' age. I'm like, let's start with that. Let's work on your balance. Let's work on activating and strengthening your toes, your feet, working on that arch by doing different methodical kind of movements on that. But yeah, so more soft tissue. I never really told people to use the splint too much. I know that's a commonly referred thing, and I think that's helped. But with my athletes and with this guy that I worked with last week, there was tightness down there. He'd done a lot of field work recently, just put on cleats after not being in cleats in 3 months. So I think that attributed just, you have sore feet sometimes. You walk a lot, your feet are inflamed. Like I said, hey, don't discount, soaking your feet in a bucket of ice water post workout. I was asking him what he did, and he came home and had lunch and then hopped in the sauna. And I'm like, all that could have dehydrated you or created more inflammation. So, yeah, it's not a long term thing. Sometimes you just need the work. That's why I think body work's important.
Yeah. One of the, you mentioned, getting some cool. So a lot of it, like, I think we've talked about, I work with a lot of dancers and, all ballroom, lots of ballroom. Currently that's a busy season right now. So a lot of ballet. Anyways, some hip hop. But anyways, one of the things that it's common, their feet are issues, right? And they're exhausted. They spend hours at a time,
Yeah.
especially at higher levels. They're dancing all day long, multiple sessions all day long. The last thing they want to do is do recovery typically. So
Right.
one of the things that, and we always talk about, hey, why don't you soak, and Epsom salt, take a bath, do whatever, and a lot of times they're just tired, they don't feel like it. So one of the things I learned a long time ago was with the Epsom salt, like, soaking in Tupperware, right? You don't have to do a full bath, but at least get your feet in there.
Sure.
And a lot of times people don't want to jump in ice water either. So what I tell them is get a Tupperware and put your feet in just faucet, temperature cold water,
Sure.
you drink out of the tap, just cold water, and then have a bucket or a cup of ice cubes. As your skin warms up the water a little, throw a couple cubes in there. Just keep it at a constant cool to cold level. It doesn't have to be ice cold. All
Sure.
we're trying to do is bring those blood vessels back to normal to take the pressure off, to take the tension off. And while you're doing that, throw in some Epsom salt. Everybody assumes that Epsom salt has to be in a warm bath to dissolve and stuff. No, it will dissolve in the cold water too. It will break down. And if you don't think that's going to happen, microwave it, cool it down, and then throw it in. You really don't believe me.
Sure.
But that's another thing. And then I tell them, hey, when you're done with the Epsom salt, one thing I learned, part of the Epsom salt, that the reason it works is the magnesium in it. Okay, not just the salt part drawing out inflammation, which there's information to where some people don't believe that it actually draws out. But I say, okay, well, if you don't believe that, well, it's not going to hurt. You might as well do it. So
Sure.
it does or doesn't, but we do know it's going to have magnesium in it. That's a given. And so what you want to do, what I suggest doing, is when you take your foot out or you get out of the bath, let the areas that you want to release air dry. Let that area air dry. Let the magnesium stay on you throughout the night. It'll get chalky, it'll get a little pasty or chalky. So you might not want that in your, bedroom. Yeah, but if you know what it is, it's just chalk, But anyways, that way it stays relaxed for a longer period. And one thing I talk to a lot of my dancers when they're traveling or they get done at the studio, if they get home and they're exhausted and they don't even want to do that, I told them, hey, get a spray bottle, and you can get the travel size, the little 8-ounce ones or the bigger ones. But basically, you mix a solution of Epsom salt and you put 1 ounce of salt to 8 ounces of water solution. You can put it in a little spray bottle or have it in a big one. Have it out in the parking lot in your car. Before you even get in your car, spray your body down. Jump in the car. You're already salty and sweaty already.
Doesn't matter, right?
Spray the tight calves and the feet down, especially if somebody's driving you, like for my students, their parents are driving them. Spray down, put a towel down on the floorboard, and just, you got 15-20 minute drive home, you've already started your recovery time, but for the pros and stuff, they can do that too, and it's a nice little thing that they can control, and then that eliminates a lot of the excuses, to come home and they're too tired, they got homework, they got chores to do, they got something, or they just want to eat and go to bed. Okay, well, this is, you just spray it on you, so I
It's
mean,
about as easy as it can get.
yeah, so, and it's cheap to make, and it's easy to make, I mean, you can buy magnesium sprays. One of my patients asked about that today for her
Sure.
calf ACL person. Somebody told her about magnesium spray. I said, yeah, by all means,
Yeah.
get one. It's not going to hurt. It could help, but to save people money, the Epsom salt spray. That's what. Anyway, so I just thought of that when we were talking about the treatment.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think it's about doing something and being proactive. So, like you said, if you don't have the time to do a full soak your feet. If you don't have time to do that, you can spray. There's always something. And then if you don't want to do anything, then don't expect results, And
don't
that's, yeah, it's like you can roll the dice if you're young and maybe get away with it or work out the tightness the next day, in warm-ups. But I'm a big proponent of working out the tightness the same day and not letting it sit and tighten and set overnight, and so those little things I think matter, Dustin. So those are good tips, I think, that young athletes or young professionals or even older patients or clients can take some value from.
yeah, perfect.
Well, man, before we get off today, I wanted to bring up one thing, and then I wanted to ask you what's been good with you this week. So I'll let you marinate on that. But I wanted to ask you if you've seen the J.R. Smith documentary. And do you know who he is? He's a basketball player. He played in the NBA and was on the Knicks. He was on the Cavaliers with LeBron.
I haven't seen that. Is it on
Okay,
Netflix or?
dude, let me tell you something. You're gonna love this, I think. J.R. Smith was kind of like, I'll describe him for the average fan as like the Dennis Rodman-esque type personality. So outwardly tatted, just young. He came from high school into the pros as 18, played 16 years in the pros. Some people said he left while he could still play because he was a rough personality. I know somebody well who knows him, and they say that that's, kind of a media construct, which I know can happen. But my point is, he has a documentary out. He's an NBA player. His documentary is interesting. It's called Redefined. I would like you to try to find it at some point in time. It's on Amazon, I think. And Redefined is what it's called. And what it's about is J.R. Smith post retirement. He has enrolled in college to get his degree, and he's enrolled at A&T. It's a HBCU college in North Carolina, and he petitioned the NCAA for college eligibility
Oh my God.
to play golf.
Oh man.
Yeah, you thought I was going to say basketball or
Yeah.
something, right? No, because
Yeah. Yeah.
which him going from high school to the pros, you're like, maybe no. He petitioned to play the NCAA so he could join the college golf team, and he's probably like a 5 handicap for golfers if you know what that means. At least at the start of this journey, before enrolling as a college student, he's trying to get his degree, so he's a student athlete, and I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
The documentary is about him finishing the pros. They touch on his background and how he was perceived and his NBA and the shots he hit. And, he had some moments towards the end of his career where, I guess he was like a hated person, I guess you could say. But I have a lot of respect for him to go back to school. He's enrolled, he's joined the college golf team. He's showing all these young student athletes and young students that you can do something after achieving greatness, which is what we talk about, right? You can be great in more than one thing. And so I'm like 3 episodes deep, and it's captivating to me. I would say watch it if you can. It's an interesting kind of story. I wish him well on the golf tour. Yeah, so I'm glad that you hadn't heard of it, and maybe you
Yeah,
can check it out.
I will for sure. I'll give you my little synopsis of it, and
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a cool story. You find yourself rooting for him.
yeah, I like those.
Yeah. Well, before we go, man, I spoke with our friend Corey the other day. He asked how you were doing. I said you were doing well. we're still knocking out weekly podcasts, and he just wanted to say hello, so I wanted to share that with you too.
Appreciate that. That's nice. I've been following him. I've given him a shout out or two on Twitter with his
Yeah.
camps coming up. So I had some random person, follower, retweet that tweet that was a fan of Corey. So that was
Nice.
cool.
Nice.
Yeah, so trying to give him love. Yeah. So tell him I said hi.
I will for sure next time I see him. Well, anything else before we sign off and catch up next week?
Yeah, no, a lot going on. Me and you got to talk offline with all the good stuff coming up, and
Yeah.
I'm excited for the next quarter here. And we got some good goals and got some good stuff coming. So yeah, let's keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll chat later on in the week during the weekdays. Shoot me a text when you have some downtime or have a good time in the week. I'm leaving out of town this weekend for a family wedding, so we have that at the end of the week. I'm settling in with work at the new office this week, so there's a little busyness with that, but I'll have some commute time on the way up and back, so we'll definitely chat.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Let's
Good.
do
Well,
that.
thank you for making time today, Dustin. Always good to chop it up with you. I feel like I learn something all the time, and it's good to bounce some ideas off of you. So I appreciate it. Uh, and to all our listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for the feedback we get. We do listen to it. I try to bring up some of those topics when we talk. Um, and we will catch up with you guys soon. Thank you again. Stay healthy. Be safe, everybody out there. This is the Second Opinion Sports Medicine Podcast with Dr. Dhokal.
Dr. Glass.
And we will catch you guys in a few days. Good night. Be safe. Talk to you soon.